In 1983, a fascinating archaeological artifact was discovered in a burial cave north of Jerusalem. An ossuary dating back to the time of Jesus was found, with an inscription that read, Joanna, daughter of Johanan, son of Theophilus, the high priest. Now, since the English version of the name Joanna is Joanna, it's worth noting that apart from this artifact, the only other ancient text that features the name Joanna together with a person named Theophilus is the Gospel of Luke. So, could the Joanna and Theophilus named on this ossuary be the same individuals mentioned in Luke's account of the life of Jesus? The Joanna ossuary is currently located at a museum on the campus of the University of Haifa. So on a recent trip to Israel, I made my way to the top of Mount Carmel where the university is located in order to get a closer look at this artifact and to find more information about it. At the base of this building is an important exhibit hall known as the Hecht Museum, which features an impressive collection of artifacts related to ancient Jewish history and culture, including the remains of this ancient boat from 400 BC. A number of ossuaries are also on display, which date back to the time of Jesus. What's this particular artifact saying?
So apparently it says Ramses.
Amir Walensky is one of the curators at the Hecht Museum, and he agreed to talk with me about some of the unique artifacts in their collection, including the Joanna ossuary. For those who may not be aware, what exactly is an ossuary?
So an ossuary, they were used for secondary burial. First, the deceased were buried in special caves, and then a year later, the relatives came and collected the bones into an ossuary.
So basically it's a bone box.
Exactly. It's a box for bones. Yeah. We know that in general, Jews in Israel were using ossuaries from the 1st century to the 3rd century. This is a relatively late, well-made ossuary. And we also have the story of the lady on the side here in Aramaic, which is very interesting. But you can also see that they carved out the legs, and the architectural structure of the whole ossuary is much more ornate.
Vaulted top?
Yeah, the vaulted top. Actually, this is very typical to the late ossuaries. The one that you're interested in today is this ossuary of Joanna, the daughter of Yochanan, the son of Theophilus HaKohen HaGadol, the great priest. As far as I know, this was a very prominent family, a lot of members that were very involved in the authorities of the time.
In my reading of Josephus, the high priests were kind of royal figures. They wore purple and scarlet and crowns of gold, and they were members of the aristocracy. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes. There were, the religious, both religious and political and economical elite of the Jewish public during that period here in Israel.
There are some who make the connection between the Theophilus, the high priest, and the one addressed in the Gospel of Luke, because it says most excellent,
yes,
which is kind of a way of saying your excellency. In light of that connection, that it's the same name, similar title, same time, same place, what do you think about that possible connection that Luke may have been addressing the high priest of his period?
It seems probable.
Is it probable that Luke wrote to Theophilus the high priest? Here are several reasons that, in my opinion, make this likely. First of all, the two men named Theophilus not only share the same name, but also appear to be men of high office. Luke calls his Theophilus most excellent, using the same formal address he later applies to governors. According to Josephus, Theophilus the high priest also held a most excellent office, since he was given dominion over the nation and became the leader of the Judean aristocracy. Both men also lived around the time of Jesus. Luke wrote to his Theophilus in order to inform him of the things Jesus fulfilled among us, and the Theophilus of the ossuary became high priest in 37 AD, not long after the time of Caiaphas. In fact, as the son of Annas, he would have been present at Jesus' trial and crucifixion. According to the ossuary, the high priest Theophilus had a granddaughter named Joanna, and a woman of the same name appears twice in Luke's narrative. Surprisingly, this Joanna was also a person of nobility, since she was married to Cusa, Herod's epitropos, which means procurator or governor. Finally, many scholars have noted that Joanna appears at the center of a chiasm in Luke 24, indicating that for some reason Luke chose to highlight her as the central witness to the empty tomb.
There's also another connection to be made in that there's only two texts in the ancient world that refer both to a Theophilus and a Joanna, and that is the Gospel of Luke and this artifact. Do you think that that's interesting as well? Like another reason to connect the two?
Again, I'm not an expert on the matter, but as far as I know, Theophilus is a pretty uncommon name for Jews, and I wouldn't think it's a coincidence. Theophilus, and it has a granddaughter, Joanna, doesn't seem like a coincidence to me.
And one of the interesting things about chapter 24 of Luke's Gospel is that it has a chiastic structure that seems to be highlighting her name. She has a prominent role in his narrative somehow, so if Luke is writing to Theophilus the high priest, it would make sense that he would present his granddaughter in a position of prominence, right?
Right. Also, given the fact that Theophilus was involved in the Jesus trial, so they were both involved, and the whole family, and also other members of the family are involved, as far as I know.
Yeah, it says in Luke's Gospel that all the chief priests were there at the crucifixion.
Right. I know there's an issue of why wasn't Joanna buried in the family estate? So my thinking would be that, there's some story with this specific Joanna, and this is why somebody did the effort to write down, the family lineage.
Dan Barag and David Flusser made a related point in their 1985 article, The Ossuary of Joanna, Granddaughter of the High Priest Theophilus. In their comments, they noted that, quote, on the front of the ossuary is engraved an arcade of 3 arches, but the craftsmanship is rather poor. The lower quality becomes even more apparent when Joanna's ossuary is compared with others on display at the Hecht Museum. But if Joanna was the granddaughter of the high priest, why is her ossuary so plain? And why wasn't she buried in the family tomb? Amir Walensky argues that this may have something to do with her Christian faith.
Maybe she was associated with the first followers of Jesus Christ, and they were persecuted, they were not so popular. So this might explain why she wasn't buried in the family estate. However, somebody thought that it was important to associate her to her famous grandfather, Theophilus, the high priest. If, on the other hand, she was buried in the family estate, there would be no need to associate her to Theophilus.
Later that afternoon, I traveled to the north coast of the Sea of Galilee in order to visit a handful of important locations, including the archaeological dig site at El Araj, which many believe to be the location of biblical Bethsaida. When I arrived at that dig site the following morning, I discovered that Steven Notley, who serves as the academic director of the El Araj excavation project, had actually studied under Hebrew University professor David Flusser. Since Dr. Flusser had co-written the first journal article about the Joanna ossuary, I decided to ask Dr. Notley if he was familiar with this artifact and what he thought about its implications.
Did you study under David Flusser?
I did. He was my professor.
Are you familiar with his the write-up he did with Daniel Barag about the ossuary of Joanna?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you think it's possible that Theophilus, the high priest, is the same that Luke mentions? Because he's a most excellent Theophilus.
That's right. Exactly. No, that's one of the things that Flusser drew from that, is that perhaps we're looking here at the historical figure. I mean, Christians tend to read it as beloved of God.
Yeah.
He says, no, it's a very specific individual, high priest in the first century. No, I think there's a lot of weight to that.
And Luke's gospel is the only one that mentions a Joanna.
That's right.
And so it's a significant Joanna too. Some have argued that she's a person of nobility. She's married to Herod's right-hand man, the Epitropos. And she's also mentioned in a chiasm in chapter 24. Her name appears in a central place, and scholars have noted it, but they haven't known what to do with it. But if it's written to Theophilus the high priest, it would make sense that she would be highlighted.
That's right. That's right. The interesting point is that you have Luke writing to individuals in a pre-70 setting, which also sort of blows up some of their,
That's right.
their understanding. You know, people suggest Luke is written 80, 90, 100. He's reflecting a political reality some 50 to 60 years before.
You know, it's interesting. He starts off his gospel saying, referring to the things that have been fulfilled among us. And so I wonder if that kind of implies that both he and Theophilus were witnesses of things that happened during the Jesus day.
I have no difficulty with that.
And then if it's to Theophilus the high priest, Josephus seems to say that he was dead by 67 because the last living member of the sons of Annas was alive then. So he died sometime before 67. So if you're going to write to Theophilus, you got to do it while he's still alive.
I would certainly date Luke before the destruction of the temple. So it's a very, Luke has a lot of good information that unfortunately in scholarship is often overlooked.
I'm convinced that the Joanna ossuary is one of the most significant yet overlooked archaeological discoveries related to the Bible, especially in light of its connection to the Gospel of Luke. In my forthcoming book, Luke's Key Witness, I list close to 50 scholars who have attempted in some way to connect Luke's Theophilus to the Jewish high priest, and I can now add Amir Walensky at the Hecht Museum, Steven Notley, and surprisingly, David Flusser, who was one of the first scholars to announce the discovery of the Joanna ossuary. Here's my list of the top 5 reasons in favor of linking this ossuary to the Joanna and Theophilus of Luke's Gospel. First, Luke's Theophilus and the high priest were both men of high office and excellent social standing. Second, Theophilus, son of Annas, lived in Jerusalem and was involved in the trial and crucifixion of Jesus. Third, apart from the ossuary, the only other ancient text to mention both a Theophilus and a Joanna is the Gospel of Luke. Fourth, the two Joannas not only shared the same name, but lived at the same time and belonged to the same aristocratic class. And fifth, the ossuary provides the best explanation for the chiasm centering on Joanna found in Luke 24. We also discovered that this view has implications for the dating of Luke's 2 volumes. Since Josephus indicates Theophilus the high priest was no longer alive after 67 AD, this would be the latest possible date for both Luke and Acts. This ends up placing Luke's gospel well within the eyewitness period and before the destruction of Jerusalem. If Luke did write to Theophilus the high priest, I'm convinced that his gospel should be seen as a kind of public affidavit, certifying all that Jesus said and did, by appealing to the testimony of his closest disciples and witnesses. According to Luke 21, Jesus told his disciples that they would have opportunities to testify before kings and rulers on his behalf. Therefore, perhaps we should begin to view Luke's gospel itself in this light. If you would like to download a pre-release PDF version of my book, Luke's Key Witness, you'll find a link below with more information about that, along with additional links to episodes of my podcast related to this topic and which feature the following conversations.
An ossuary was discovered in 1983, which says Joanna, the daughter of Johanan, son of Theophilus, the high priest.
Oh, it
And
says
so-
high priest?
Yes,
says,
it does. It says high priest.
wow.
So the only two texts in the ancient world that mention both a Joanna and a Theophilus are the Gospel of Luke and this artifact.
Yeah, interesting.
And so if it's his granddaughter, that would explain the chiasm.
Theophilus himself, if Joanna is his granddaughter, who's been a member of the movement from well before the crucifixion, this has been bubbling away in his own family. And so Luke's apologia would be very heartfelt, would be received in a heartfelt fashion by Theophilus, because he's, in a sense, if I could put it this way, about Joanna, he would have known about Joanna's dabbling with Christ up in Galilee, well before the crucifixion. And so could you say perhaps it was, his dirty little secret for a long time?
But even seeing the chiasm that you discuss, where attention is drawn specifically to Joanna, it seems to me that that's intentional. And so I think you've made a very good case, and I would be in full agreement with you. It goes hand in glove with the idea that Theophilus was a high priest, and the Jewishness of the gospel, the Jewishness of Acts, the Jewish context. It all fits together. So, yeah, I'm right there with you.
Most commentators never even provide the option that Theophilus may have been a high priest. But in my thinking, the one mentioned by Josephus, he's just an excellent candidate based on...
Excellent candidate. I think you're right.
Number one, he's got the same name. Number two, he's in Jerusalem. Right. Number three, he's a man of nobility, which would make the person say most excellent. So he's your go-to option.
I think he's got to be the first, yes. Of all the options, he would be my first choice. Now, here's what I always...
Drives me crazy that nobody mentions it as an option.
I know.